around 300,000 years ago, while massive glaciers still dominated much of the northern hemisphere, certain regions of Earth developed unique ecological zones, where lush forests bordered arid grasslands and where the seasons, terrain, and climate shifted rapidly. In these transitional zones, from East Africa to Southern Europe, Homo sapiens evolved not only physiologically but cognitively. They learned to adapt to two radically different environments simultaneously. On one side, dense, humid forests demanded heightened awareness, tracking skills, and exceptional memory. On the other, open landscapes, grasslands, foothills, savannas allowed for firemaking, communal cooking, and group formation. The presence of Homo sapiens in these ecological boundaries was not coincidental. Populations living at the forest's edge had ideal conditions to develop both physically and mentally. Access to varied food sources, flexible hunting strategies, and, critically, frequent interaction with forest and fire came to represent two survival models. The forest required silence, intuition, and pattern recognition, where every sound, scent, or mark could signal danger or opportunity. Fire offered light, warmth, and stability, conditions that enabled new social behaviors, food sharing, group protection, and rudimentary communication. Archaeological records suggest that Homo sapiens living near forest-grassland interfaces possessed more diverse tools, left behind more fire evidence, and exhibited more complex social structures than those deep within forests or entirely on open plains. This raises a compelling hypothesis. Transitional landscapes between forest and fire were neurological accelerators, catalyzing the brain's shift toward abstract thought. From a neuroscience perspective, processing two types of contrasting signals, hidden versus exposed, dark versus light, danger versus safety, likely encouraged greater connectivity across brain regions. This may explain why Homo sapiens surpassed other human species in memory, simulation, and imagination. The evolutionary difference was not in muscle, teeth, or speed. It was in the ability to stand between two ecosystems, and from there construct a third, the world of the mind. Between forest and fire is not merely a geographical description. It defines the precise cognitive threshold where Homo sapiens stopped reacting to the world and started interpreting it. This is where survival became understanding, and understanding became the beginning of dreams. Part 2. The First Firelight. Memory in Ashes. The mastery of fire stands as one of the most pivotal milestones in human evolution. The earliest known evidence of controlled fire dates back over 1.5 million years, associated with Homo erectus. However, regular, sustained, and socially integrated use of fire appears primarily around 300,000 years ago, coinciding with the rise of Homo sapiens. Sites such as Kesem Cave, Israel, Gesher Benot Yaakov, Jordan, and Wonderwork Cave, South Africa, reveal thick ash deposits, scorched animal bones, and heat-altered tools. These findings confirm that Homo sapiens not only created fire, but maintained it night after night, season after season, generation after generation. Fire was no longer an accidental byproduct of nature, like lightning or wildfires. It became a controlled element, ignited for cooking, preserved for warmth, used to repel predators, and to define territory. More critically, fire became the foundation of a new kind of social space. Unlike any other species, Homo sapiens harnessed the time spent around the fire not just to survive, but to communicate, organize, and connect. After sunset, firelight was often the only remaining illumination, and in that circle of glow, spoken language began to flourish. These gatherings likely marked the dawn of oral tradition, recounting hunts, mapping migrations, warning of danger, and recalling recent events. From a neurological standpoint, fire created the perfect conditions for advanced brain function, focused attention, shared sensory input, and group synchrony. These factors fostered collective memory formation and linguistic complexity. Some theories suggest that past tense grammar, pronouns, and nested clause structures in human language could have emerged and evolved specifically within these nocturnal storytelling environments. Culturally and cognitively, storytelling marked the distinction between present and past, between real events and reconstructed narratives. This was the beginning of historical consciousness, something uniquely human. Fire also became a symbol for abstract concepts: life, death, time, transformation. In many ancient cultures, fire was revered as sacred, central to origin myths, rituals, and cosmology. The earliest sparks of spiritual belief, prior to organized mythology, may have begun with watching fire's unpredictable dance and asking, why does it move? Why does it vanish? What remains in the ashes? Through language, experience became transmissible. Memory ceased to be individual. And from this, culture was born, a system of information that transcended genetics. Fire, therefore, was not just a survival tool. It became a neurological, social, and symbolic infrastructure, a conduit for structured cognition. From firelight, humans did not just see each other, they began to see themselves. Part 3. The Ancient Forest, a sensorial and cognitive environment. To prehistoric Homo sapiens, the forest was not merely a place to live, it was a dense ecosystem of information. Unlike open plains, where long-range vision is key, forest environments demanded advanced auditory, olfactory, and tactile processing. Every sound, from falling leaves to snapping branches or alarm calls from birds, carried data, the movement of prey, the presence of danger, or a shift in weather. The ability to interpret these signals with precision was essential for survival. Modern anthropological studies of rainforest-dwelling peoples, such as the Mbuti of Congo or the Orang Asli of Malaysia, reveal that forest navigation depends not on fixed landmarks or maps, but on subtle cues: diffused light, humidity patterns, soil texture, and ambient sound, all interpreted through lived experience. This suggests that Homo sapiens developed an informal but effective cognitive system, where knowledge was embedded in the senses, reinforced through repetition, and passed on through demonstration rather than instruction. In forests, time was no longer measured by the sharp contrasts of day and night. Instead, it was sensed through the changing angle of filtered sunlight, the rhythm of insect activity, and the scent of blooming plants or damp soil. The forest's complexity required continuous bodily adjustment, weaving, balancing, halting. This honed coordination between the nervous system and musculature, especially regions associated with spatial memory and navigation, such as the hippocampus. But the forest was more than a physical habitat. Ethnographic and archaeological evidence suggests that humans began to associate forests with spiritual significance. Among modern forager cultures, forests are often seen as the domain of ancestral spirits, locations for birth, healing, and funeral rituals. Their constantly shifting, elusive nature made forests a natural metaphor for the unseen. This idea aligns with early cave art from the Paleolithic era. Spirals, handprints, and hybrid animal figures often believed to record trance states or ritual visions. These experiences likely took place in settings similar to forests: dark, humid, acoustically rich. Notably, forests also catalyzed personal imagination. Solitary movement through these environments freed the brain from external threat processing and encouraged inward focus, associative thought, recollection, and simulation, which underpins symbolic thinking. Repetitive actions like collecting feathers, unique stones, or carved bark indicate that Homo sapiens had begun assigning subjective meaning to objects, a precursor to symbolic representation. When these items were brought back to shelters, displayed, or preserved, they became material memory systems, performing functions akin to written language in preserving knowledge and belief. Cognitively, forests acted as multisensory activators, forging connections between real-world perception and imagined narratives. Here, Homo sapiens learned not only to see what was, but to remember what had been and anticipate what might be. Forests did not create memory, but they demanded it for survival, and in doing so, they shaped one of humanity's most crucial evolutionary traits, the ability to remember and represent the invisible. Part 4, Where Fire Meets Forest, the formation of symbolic thought at the ecological border between forest and grassland, where Homo sapiens interacted with both enclosed and open environments. Archaeological findings point to a fundamental shift in human behavior and cognition. Around 300,000 years ago, beyond the use of tools and resource exploitation, Homo sapiens began engaging in behaviors that exceeded basic survival. At sites such as Skul and Kafze, Israel, and Jebel Irhoud, Morocco, early burials have been discovered, deliberately arranged bodies, sometimes accompanied by pierced shells, animal bones, or red ochre pigment. Burial with grave goods is strong evidence of the emergence of individual identity and symbolic thought. These humans no longer perceived objects solely in functional terms. They imbued them with abstract meaning. Death was no longer an end. It became a passage. Simultaneously, sites like Blombos Cave, South Africa, El Castillo, Spain, and Sulawesi, Indonesia contain early visual expressions, engravings, hand stencils, geometric motifs made with pigment or carved into stone. These suggest that Homo sapiens had developed the capacity to externalize inner thoughts through visual symbols, a key precursor to art and language. Significantly, such behaviors are not randomly distributed. They tend to cluster in regions that combine abundant forest resources with reliable fire use. Fire provided shared light and communal space. Forests provided the materials, bone, wood, pigment, plants, and the rich sensory context to construct meaning. In these transitional zones, Homo sapiens could hunt, settle, and interact, creating the conditions for rituals, symbols, and social frameworks beyond kinship. The appearance of personal ornaments, bracelets made of shell, predator teeth, or carved bone, reveals that humans had begun recognizing individual identity and social roles. These items had no utilitarian function, but they conveyed status, affiliation, or life stage. Archaeologists and anthropologists widely agree that symbolic cognition is what most clearly distinguishes Homo sapiens from other human species, including Neanderthals and Homo erectus. Despite their large brains and tool use, the key difference lies not in brain size, but in how the brain encoded reality into systems of meaning. Forests, with their immersive sensory complexity, stimulated imagination. Fire, with its stable communal setting, enabled the transmission and refinement of ideas. Where these two elements intersected, foundational concepts emerged: memory, symbolism, ritual, and language. Modern neuroscience supports this. Participating in ritualized behavior, such as burial, painting, singing, or storytelling, activates the brain's default mode network, DMN, associated with self-reflection, empathy, and long-term planning. These behaviors also reinforce group identity and cohesion, vital in unpredictable, competitive environments. Thus, the awakening of the human spirit was not mystical. It was the product of cognitive evolution, catalyzed by specific ecological conditions: forests to feel, fire to reflect. At this intersection, Homo sapiens ceased being mere survivors. They became creators, capable of defining themselves and imagining worlds beyond their own. Part 5, Neurological Heritage, Descendants of Forest and Fire. Modern humans live in cities of concrete and code, illuminated by artificial light. Yet, neuroscience and behavioral research show that our sensory systems and emotional responses still rely on frameworks developed hundreds of thousands of years ago, in the forest and around the fire. When we listen to a story rich in imagery and emotion, multiple brain regions are activated: the frontal lobe, reasoning; hippocampus, memory; temporal lobe, language; and limbic system, emotion. This same neurological pattern likely evolved tens of thousands of years ago, as Homo sapiens listened to hunting tales or dream accounts around the fire. Storytelling, whether verbal, gestural, or symbolic, is not mere entertainment. It is a temporal data compression system, helping the brain store, retrieve, and transfer knowledge, experience, and social norms. Those who could tell and interpret stories had a higher survival rate. They accessed second-hand information without first-hand risk. Similarly, modern humans exhibit measurable physiological responses to natural environments, especially forests. Studies show that filtered light through leaves, the scent of damp earth, the sound of running water, or bird calls, all reduce amygdala activity, the brain's threat response center, and activate the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting calm and recovery. This indicates that forests were neurologically internalized as signals of safe habitat. Individuals who could decode natural cues more effectively survived longer, and these reflexes were reinforced over generations. Even our attraction to fire, candles, campfires, glowing stoves may stem from an ancestral social instinct. In firelight, people bond more easily, express emotions more openly, and absorb complex narratives with greater attention, confirmed by studies in group dynamics and nonverbal communication. The concept of evolutionary memory, a growing field in evolutionary psychology, suggests that modern emotions like nostalgia, inspiration, or attachment may derive from ancient adaptive behaviors rather than present-day conditions. Seemingly modern habits, listening to podcasts, reading fiction, going camping, gathering around a fire, can be traced back to behavioral templates from the forager era, especially those shaped at the intersection of forest and fire. We are not only genetic descendants, we are also neural descendants, shaped by repeated stimulation patterns encoded into our brains over millennia of adaptation to specific environments. This explains why stepping into a forest brings peace, or why hearing a moving tale brings tears. These are evolved biological signals once used by our ancestors to find safety, meaning, and kinship. In summary, though we live in an industrial world, our nervous systems, emotional reflexes, and symbolic behaviors still carry the clear imprint of two primal forces, forest and fire. And that is why, even today, we still tell stories, we still seek the woods, we still watch the flame, we still dream,